So, do we have freedom of speech? That's a question that we hear quite often, increasingly so, alarmingly so. It shouldn't even be something that we are questioning, but ultimately, under the guise of democracy, which is actually a fascist dictatorship, it's understandable why that question is being posed. But I feel like the question is flawed, because when we say we kind of just speak of ourselves as all being these equal beings of a similar wisdom, similar intellect and experience. And so, of course, it's going to be very much variable based on who's speaking, because, if someone is yet to have awoken and yet to have, experienced the dark side of our society, then, yeah, they're going to have freedom of speech, because they are ultimately going to have nothing to say which remotely affects or can be of detriment to this despotic ruling elite. And so they can continue to talk about mass entertainment, whether it's like who's your favorite musician, who's your favorite football player, sport related issues. Current affairs generally has become this menial subject field, which is not going to actually help evolve human consciousness and let us rise above the ashes of this broken society. And so really it comes down to the individual, because what any individual who has awoken to this high level of consciousness will quickly realize is that they don't have freedom of speech, even though it's very much not transparent. So, like, if you're going to go onto Twitter and you're going to start posting about things that happened in 2020 and offer the truly alternative perspective on that, which hasn't been presented and is now being sort of like obfuscated through social media, like, this whole idea of the alternative media has just sort of become the mainstream media, really. No one really watches the official, historical mainstream media anymore. So, apart from perhaps my mum and dad or just that generation. So the mainstream media has become the alternative media, and that's spearheaded by people like Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson, even like Alex Jones, and people that were seen as quite sort of like radical thinkers on the vanguard of sort of far out, cutting edge information, have become very much mainstream. They've fallen for this idolatry, really, and this idea that Elon Musk somehow, together with Donald Trump, is going to become the savior for humanity. I mean, this is absolutely absurd. Trump is just another puppet, for the one-party state. And of course, when you take the zoomed-out perspective and you think in decades or even centuries, as opposed to just the daily, day-to-day shenanigans of what's taking place, you'll begin to see that what they're doing is radicalizing people. So you get a far-left government who are proposing all these crazy things, not least like men should participate in women's sports, and then you get the person to come along who's going to undo that insanity, and therefore that person is framed as a savior, and the masses believe it because they're just taking it on a sort of like more secular daily basis, where it's like, yeah, of course, all of these measures and these things that are being passed now, they're all seemingly progressive, but it's only because we've been, it's like what, 2 steps backwards, 1 step forwards, or whichever way around, and so that's what's happening. They're constantly just throwing our minds in this direction, and they'll throw our minds in this direction, and it's very easy to get sucked into that and get played, like a sort of violin. And often it's being the heartstrings that are pulled. So they're working on our empathy and ultimately perception, because as we've got to remember, our perception is all based on information. So information is the chain and the source of the sequence of events which follows perception. Perception then drives our feelings, our thoughts, and eventually our actions, which are by and large sort of gone missing. Like, people have forgotten that we ourselves, we the people, we need to be the ones that are taking action in the world. And I feel like a lot of what's really taking place is really sort of appeasing, placating us. It's making us docile and subservient to this new political class that are seen as being these sort of radical thinkers. And so, ironically, it's the right now that's become anti-establishment, anti-authoritarian. But when you listen to people like Trump, you hear that they're just obsessed with the economy. It's all just about money. And it's nothing to do with freedom, not true freedom anyway, because remember, true freedom is totally unconditional. You won't hear anything like that uttered from the mouth of someone like Donald Trump or anyone in the political sphere, or theatre more so, whatsoever. It's all just bread and circuses. So what we need to do is see that, okay, yeah, we don't have freedom of speech. What's happening is we're being shadow banned. We're being silenced in a very sort of covert way. it's not like this obvious thing that most people will be able to understand, because they don't, for one, have the level of consciousness that's capable of cutting through the bullshit and seeing what's taking place. And two, they're not interested because we've been sort of drugged with the soma that you're familiar with through, you know, writers like Aldous Huxley, A Brave New World. And so that's what we're living in right now. We've been subdued by the soma of tennis and sport in general, mass entertainment, comedy, performance, like the persona, obfuscation, just this the ego run rampant in society. And I feel like the only way we can come out of this is to actually create physically, like, architectural projects and, you know, master planning schemes that offer autonomy, that offer us a means of survival that's totally outside of the system. And this is, of course, what I've been doing through newearth.land, which I've recently been able to, well, I've had to take it down. So you can see the URL for that if you're interested in checking out this solution for true democracy in society and true transparency, true freedom, right? No more rent, no more bills. It's rent that's keeping us in this state of consciousness that keeps voting. And when we vote, we're just voting for the same system, regardless of who's presented it before you. So it's the same thing year after year, unfortunately, we're falling for. And I hope to, you know, try and bring about change, but I am finding it very difficult to get the motivation to make videos, because I know that I'm being shadow banned as well. And, you know, I have done particularly throughout, you know, the year 2020 and 2021. So it's very difficult for people to speak out when there's just no one to hear it. So it's, you know, it's like, why would we create anything if no one's going to receive it? It's like you're just on a desert island on your own, or with a totally different species that can't receive the information that you're trying to provide, or the art form, or whatever creator out there. You know, it's like people really do things because they're going to be received and therefore impressed upon the minds of others. And, you know, it often gives an elevated sense of self, but it also hopefully improves society by and large. And so we need to reach people, and so hopefully we can help ourselves come together and create a new society based on the principles that I've outlined here and at newearth.land, which the URL of which you can find below in the description. So anyway, that's a quick video on freedom of speech. Of course, we don't have that. We only have it if you are going to be talking about menial secular affairs, things that aren't going to actually provoke any change whatsoever in the field of politics and just society in general. Society is a hoax, as Alan Watts said. Society is not your friend, as Terence McKenna said. And so the only way that we can come together and create a new one is by coming together. It's the same old message that just keeps getting echoed throughout eternity, it seems. You know, just as Martin Luther King said, those who love peace must learn to organize themselves as effectively as those who love war. And people like John Lennon, you know, come together. They are the words that become meaningless because we don't actually do it. We might do that on social media, where people now have you know, over 1 million followers, and they've only joined it a couple of years ago, and yet there seem to be alternative. Well, that's a sure sign right there that that person has been somehow paid for, or they've been placed there as a puppet, as a shill of sorts. There's a few names that come to mind, but we'll talk about those in future videos. And so, yeah, it needs to step outside of social media. It shouldn't remain just conversational. It should be about proposing something that's tangible, that can be reified with our hands, built forms that are symbolic of the changes that we're just chatting about. You know, and that's not going to cut it. So, you know, it's the law of manifestation, or the law of attraction, and just generally how do we manifest things? Well, thoughts, feelings, and actions. It has to be a closed loop circuit. Anyway, that's it for this video. Thanks very much for watching. I will see you in the next one.